Men's skincare wasn't designed to optimize skin, it was designed to sell. And those two things aren't always the same. Look down the men's aisle in any pharmacy or supermarket and you'll see it. Dark packaging, metallic finishes, words like power, force, control. And a lot of it looks less like skincare and more like something designed to maintain machinery. Safe, functional, unemotional, and that aesthetic isn't accidental. It reflects how the category was built, not around biology, but around psychology. More specifically, around making skincare feel acceptable for men who've been socially conditioned to reject anything associated with femininity, which historically has been framed as weakness. Because when a category is built primarily around acceptability, optimization becomes secondary, and products evolve to feel safe, not necessarily to perform at the highest level. And that creates a gap. Because in reality, skincare isn't gender specific, it's skin specific. Men don't need completely separate products, they need better guidance, better formulation priorities, better alignment between what their skin actually needs and what they're being offered. And that gap is where the real opportunity is. I've spent the past 10 years working in tech, primarily automation, AI, and marketing systems, helping companies like Google, the BBC, Liverpool Football Club, and the Financial Times understand how people discover, evaluate, and choose products. And skincare is one of the most interesting categories I've seen, because skincare isn't just evolving, it's entering a structural transformation. And AI, specifically machine learning and what's known as the agentic web, will fundamentally change how products are evaluated and selected. But to understand why that matters, we first need to understand how we got here. I'm Kirk, and how men in their 30s who look tired or prematurely aged get their skin looking healthier, clearer, and more rested, without complexity or hype. So let's reset. For the most part, men don't buy men's skincare because they believe moisturizer works differently on male skin. They buy it because it reduces cognitive load. But that simple decision had an unintended consequence, one that quietly limited how effective most men's skincare products became. Skincare is a high complexity category that's overwhelming for a lot of the women I've spoken with, let alone the men. There's a reason you see so many people Googling ingredients and looking up product reviews in the skincare aisle of your local drugstore. Hundreds of ingredients, thousands of products that don't act the same for everybody. And historically, very little guidance has been directed at men, so that For Men section became a filtering mechanism. A quick shortcut for telling men what to buy. Not because it was biologically necessary, but because it simplified decision making. It provided permission. It said, you don't need to understand everything, just start here. And that served an important purpose. It helped millions of men engage with skincare for the first time. But it also constrained the category. Because once positioning becomes anchored to identity rather than physiology, formulation priorities tend to stabilize around familiarity rather than performance, which is doing a disservice to the skeptical, time-poor customer that could be getting so much better results from their skincare. Another interesting dynamic is that the buyer and the user aren't always the same person. I've been following Ben Shepherd and Joel Dommett's Businessmen podcast closely, where they're documenting the journey of creating their own men's skincare brand, For Skin. And what's come up in their research, and they keep coming back to, is that 80% of men's skincare is purchased by women, partners, wives, girlfriends, acting as intermediaries. It's the old cats don't buy cat food analogy that a lot of old school marketers use. And culturally, gay and bisexual men have often been early adopters of skincare, engaging more deeply with the category and helping normalize behaviors that eventually diffuse into the mainstream once it feels more safe and acceptable, which highlights something important. Skincare adoption has always been driven as much by culture as by biology. Now, there are some real physiological differences between male and female skin. On average, male skin is approximately 20 to 25% thicker, meaning they can typically tolerate stronger products. Male skin tends to produce more sebum, which means ingredients like salicylic acid are often more effective. Male skin also experiences frequent mechanical stress from shaving, and it often exhibits different patterns of inflammation and barrier disruption. These differences exist at the population level, that individual skin types, genetics, and environment remain far more important than gender alone. For example, panthenol is particularly useful for supporting barrier repair and reducing post-shave irritation. Niacinamide helps regulate oil production and improves barrier function. Stronger active ingredients are often well tolerated, although individual tolerance varies. Gel formulations, when available, are typically easier to apply evenly around facial hair, improving consistency of coverage. But retinoids still remain one of the most effective interventions for improving skin structure, collagen synthesis, and long-term skin quality. Vitamin C still helps protect against oxidative stress and supports collagen stability. And sunscreen remains the single most effective tool for preventing cumulative skin damage. These aren't male ingredients, they're skin ingredients. They work based on physiology, not identity. Which raises an important question. If the underlying biological requirements aren't fundamentally different, why is the category structured as if they are? Now, a product that demonstrates this perfectly is this. The L'Oreal Men Expert Hydra Energetic Comfort Max Moisturizer, which is labeled as containing vitamin C and ceramides. And the packaging itself looks less like skincare and more like something designed to maintain machinery. While it does contain ceramides and vitamin C derivative, which sound promising, they're combined with relatively high levels of denatured alcohol and added fragrance ingredients that in high concentrations can compromise barrier health and increase irritation risk, limiting the product's overall effectiveness. So while it creates the impression of advanced skincare, the actual physiological impact is often modest. And when someone uses a product like this for months and sees only subtle improvement, they don't question the formulation. They question skincare itself. They conclude it doesn't work. And that's where the real problem begins. Because it's not that skincare doesn't work, it's that most men were never given truly optimized formulations to begin with. And as a result, they dismiss skincare and the positive impact it can have on their confidence and appearance. And that's frustrating. For many men, brands like Kiehl's act as a transition point into more serious skincare. They represent a step beyond purely functional, compliance-driven products into something that feels more intentional. And I think Kiehl's is a good example of a brand that has earned trust culturally, even if technically some of their formulations no longer represent the frontier. They have a number of products that are well constructed and reliable. They also have others that reflect older formulation standards, which, while acceptable, don't always serve the skin as effectively as modern formulations now can. I'm still testing several of their products myself, and I'll share a full breakdown when I've spent more time with them. But what's interesting about Kiehl's is the role they play psychologically. They don't rely heavily on gender signaling. Owning a Kiehl's product feels intentional, considered, not performative. And that positioning is powerful because the perception of technical sophistication often exceeds the actual level of formulation innovation. And that shift is cultural as much as it is technical. The Ultra Facial Cream is a good example of this. It's a product that I like. It delivers reliable hydration, good barrier support, and consistent performance, even if technically there are now more advanced formulations available. Because when you examine the category today, formulation standards have evolved. Barrier science is better understood. Ingredient selection is more precise. And consumers themselves are more informed. The expectation is no longer acceptability. It's optimization. And that shift is cultural as much as it is technical. Men are no longer engaging with self-maintenance reluctantly. They're engaging with it deliberately. Fitness, nutrition, sleep, longevity, skincare now sits naturally within that ecosystem. Not as vanity, but as maintenance. And the brands that understand that distinction are the ones that will remain relevant, especially when consumers become AI-enabled and are able to simplify such a complex purchase journey. Some newer brands reflect this shift more clearly. Abeity, for example, operates slightly adjacent to skincare in the makeup space. Now, beyond experimenting with some tinted sunscreens, the makeup category is something I know relatively little about, but I spent some time researching male makeup brands, including Warpaint, MMUK, and Chanel's Boy de Chanel. And the one that stood out to me is Abeity, because the experience of shopping on their website and their Instagram page feels less like entering a traditional cosmetics environment and more like browsing the Zara menswear site. It's calm, minimal, considered. The products are presented as part of a broader system of self-presentation, not something separate or exceptional. And that distinction is important. It doesn't feel defensive and it doesn't feel apologetic. It simply presents self-maintenance as normal, which aligns with how many men now approach appearance. Not as something separate from performance, but as part of it. Masculinity isn't becoming weaker, it's becoming more integrated, more comfortable with optimization. And that opens a door for entirely different types of products and positioning. Now, there's another shift happening beneath the surface, and it's one that will fundamentally change how skincare products are discovered. My background is in AI and machine learning. I've worked on systems that help companies understand consumer behavior, automate communication, and optimize decision making. What's emerging now is what's often called the agentic web, where consumers increasingly delegate decision making to intelligent agents acting on their behalf. Instead of browsing manually, they specify goals, constraints, and preferences, and the system selects optimal products. This changes the competitive landscape significantly, because for the first time, products will be evaluated purely on how well they work, because agents optimize for performance, not identity. They evaluate ingredients, outcomes, compatibility, consistency, which will shift the advantage towards products that are genuinely well formulated. I've been exploring this myself by building a prototype esthetician in your pocket, where you upload a photo, describe your concerns, and receive recommendations based on your skin's physiology. This represents a broader transition from mass market positioning to physiology-driven personalization. So men don't need separate skincare. They need better skincare, better guidance, better alignment between formulation and physiology, better personalization. And the brands that understand that shift, both culturally and technologically, will define the future category. And the individuals who understand it will finally be able to optimize their skin properly. If you enjoyed this and you want to watch me outline my own skin reset system, you can watch my video up here. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.